Hi, folks, and welcome to session number 8 in our Club Committee Member Professional Development Program. I'm Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter, and I'm providing this program to you on behalf of Monsu Caulfield. So once again, welcome and thank you for coming along. What we're going to do today is just get into the brief introduction, and then we're going to focus on how to respond when you are provided with feedback on a personal level. Help you to understand the 3 types of feedback that you will receive personally and as a club, and help you to understand why you should be collecting feedback for your club. And of course, just wrapping up this 8-part program. So what are some of the ways that you react when someone gives you feedback about anything, especially if you didn't ask for it? What are some of the different ways you react to feedback when someone gives it to you, especially when you didn't ask for it? Ritu, have you got any thoughts on that?
I guess you can be taken aback by it if it's not something like it.
So the first thing is you're taken aback. Anything else?
I guess like in a way, if you're looking for improvement, it's a good thing, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's true. Like in a way, if you're looking for improvement, it's a good thing. It definitely is a good thing. I'm going to show that tonight. Welcome, Alina. Great to see you with us again this evening too. We're just having a quick chat about this question. What are some of the different ways you react when someone gives you feedback, especially if you didn't ask for it? They say something like, "Oh, Alina, you should," and then they just tell you what they think you should do on something. Have you got any comments on that question, Alina?
I think it depends on the context. If it's constructive feedback and it's something that will potentially help me grow, then I will accept it. But if it's just like snarky comments, then I would just ignore them.
Okay, very powerful. And understanding that last part, Alina, is really important, is that for some people, if they receive feedback, they think they need to take it on board. They think they need to do it. But maybe that feedback's not appropriate. And as you said, maybe the context is really they're being narky or something like that, and they're not really being very helpful at all. Nonetheless, when we receive feedback, I'm going to teach you something that's really, really helpful, especially, Ritu, as you said, your first reaction when someone just gives you feedback when you didn't ask for it, and you said, I'm initially taken aback because I wasn't expecting it, right? And that's so normal. It's such a great response for you to share that with us, Richard, because it's very, very common that people will just give us feedback when we didn't ask for it. But what can you do under those circumstances? I'm going to teach you something very, very soon. So remember when we talked about mental models in the self-talk session. So mental models are our theories about how the world works. This mental model is something that I encourage you to adopt that will help you under every single circumstance where you receive any feedback. And also when your club receives feedback. So this mental model works on both a personal level and a club or organizational level. If you use the mental model that feedback is a gift, so straight away you go, feedback equals gift. What's the first thing you would say after receiving it? No matter what it was, whether it was for you or not, whether it was something that was even a bit narky, what would you always say if you started out with a mental model, it's a gift?
Thank you.
Yeah, spot on. You would say, thank you. Now, this is really, really helpful. This is the mental model I encourage you to adopt. Now, if you think about gifts, okay, so let's go back to that picture. Throughout your lives, have you had a birthday or had a special occasion where you've received some gifts and you've opened up that gift and it wasn't very good? Has that ever happened? Right? Sometimes there it goes. I'm seeing you nodding away. Right? So it's sort of normal to get some gifts that aren't that good, but nonetheless, when you received that gift, before you unwrapped it, you still said, thank you first. This is why I encourage say thank you and then worry about whether that gift is any good or not. Okay, right? Now, some gifts, and we're going to keep going with this metaphor, if you like, or this mental model about gifts. So there's fundamentally 3 categories of feedback as a gift. The first category are gifts that are for you, about you, and are immediately useful. Recently, we had Father's Day. I have 5 children. As per normal, I got some socks. Now, socks are actually pretty useful because we lose them all the time, right? Okay. So the gift was for me, it was about me, and they were immediately useful. So that's a metaphor. Sometimes people will give you feedback about your behavior. That's exactly the same. It is for you. It is about making you better, as you were saying it before, Alina, and it is immediately useful because you understand it. Then there's the second category of gifts as feedback. They are for you. It is about you, but for one reason or another, it's not immediately useful. You need some time to consider it. You might need to ponder the feedback you're given. It's a little bit like, imagine if you had a birthday during exams and someone knew that you loved apples. So they gave you William Isaacson's biography on Steve Jobs. That's about 700 pages thick. Now, in the middle of the exams, are you going to read that book? Probably not. No, you're going to put it on the shelf for later on, for another time, for maybe when you're on holidays. And then you'll get out that book and you'll read it then. So you'll actually go and use that book when it's useful. Sometimes people will give you feedback and you realize, you know what? I understand where they're coming from. I understand it's about me, but I need some time to make sense of it. Now, some time might go by, and over that time, as you make sense of it, welcome Sadman, as you make sense of that feedback, you're then able to use it. So the important category here, though, is it is for you and it is about you, and at a point in time, it will be useful for you. Now, here comes the third category of feedback as a gift. We're using that mental model. This is feedback that's a bit like that NARCI feedback that Alina mentioned earlier. It's not for you, it's not about you, and nor is it useful for you. It's actually about the person who is giving you the feedback. And what they're trying to do is to tell you how you should be more like them. That's actually what's happening. They're saying you should be more like me, so this is what you should do. If you receive feedback like that and you unwrap that gift, when they give you that gift, what's the first thing you say?
Thank you.
Correct. Thank you. All 3 of you at the same time. Well done. You say thank you, and then you do this. In cricket, if you love cricket, that means you let the ball go through to the keeper. You leave it alone, right? It's the same for that feedback. You say thank you and you let it go. Or using the gift metaphor still, you unwrap it, you go, not a very good gift. Now, don't rewrap that gift and give it to someone else because that's no good. What you actually do is, in this case, you would metaphorically bin it, okay? Don't take it on board. And Alina said that earlier. So it's really important that you recognize, when you receive feedback, and often it's not asked for, it just comes to you, say thank you, and then quickly you have the right to assess. So say thank you. Determine which of the 3 categories the feedback sits within. And then you respond accordingly. For categories 1 and 2, seek support as you modify your behavior. We'll talk about what that support looks like soon. And for category 3, just let it go, right? This is an important life skill. And understanding yourself, some of you just naturally through your personality will be people pleasers. And the fact that you're attracted to working on a club committee probably increases the chances that you are a people pleaser type because you care about people, and that's why you're actually giving up your time to contribute to the clubs that you're on. So it's quite possible that statistically you're more like a people pleaser. If that's the case, you're more at risk of feeling like you need to take on board the feedback. Now, this is feedback from anyone. So over time, you learn to be able to assess honestly, is this feedback helping me get better and improve over time? Or is this feedback really about the person giving me the feedback just telling me how I should be more like them? Now, sometimes this can even happen where in the academic space, some of the lecturers will give you feedback on your public speaking, for example. That's not necessarily all that helpful over time. A lot of it is absolutely helpful, but sometimes it might not be. They'll be telling you that you should be doing something like what they're doing, even though in reality, what they're doing might not be all that good. Right. So you've got to learn to judge this over time, both in that space and certainly at a personal level. Now, what if you're the person giving the feedback now? Let's flip this around. You're now the person offering some feedback to someone else. First, always ask, am I just trying to tell this person how they should be more like me? That's the first thing. Ask yourself this question. If your answer is yes, then keep your feedback to yourself. If your answer is no, this is about them and how they can be the best they can be in their role for themselves and the club, then would you like to know a method to try to use with them to increase the chances that they will accept the feedback you're offering them? Who'd like to know that a method like that? Yep, feel free to use the chat function like normal folks and unmute yourselves as well, okay? All right, so what the method is, in fact, I just used it. Every single one of us, we'll use this metaphor, every single one of us has a room of learning. And there's one door to get inside someone else's room of learning. In fact, there's one door to get inside your room of learning, I would argue. Now, when that door's closed, right, there's basically two ways to get in through that door to someone else's room of learning. What do you think the two ways are, folks? How could you get in to someone else's room of learning when the door's closed? What are your thoughts? How would you do it?
Personally, I don't really give feedback unless they ask, like, what's your opinion on this? And then I'll say, oh, maybe you can try and do this. Like, it might work better. Or like, if the task that they're doing currently is failing terribly, then only I will say, or else I'll usually wait till they're the one that asks for feedback before I give it.
Okay, so if we use the metaphor of the door and they are in control of the door to their learning, when they're asking for feedback, what have they done to their door if it was shut to start with?
They open it.
Correct, they open the door. Now, when someone opens their door to their learning, do you think that increases the probability they'll take on board or at least listen to what's being said, or decrease it? Which one?
Increase.
Increase, right. Okay. Now, what if you've seen something that they haven't asked for yet? Because this could also be possible in leadership in particular. Sometimes we can see people doing things that they're not aware of yet, that it's not as effective or as efficient as it could be. How would we then get inside their room of learning so they open the door?
You knock on the door.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor. You would knock on the door. Okay, I'm going to teach you how you do that. Because, of course, the other way is you just barge through the door. You just go and bash your way through the door and say, here I am. I've got some feedback for you. Which, of course, for most people is simply going to trigger resistance and drive down their willingness to listen. So you can barge through people's learning room doors if you like, and you might feel good about yourself when you do it, but the probability of them actually taking on board anything you say is extremely low. All right? It's far better to knock on the door, okay? So to knock on the door, you would ask something like, would you be interested in having a chat about insert the topic? Are you open to having a conversation about insert the topic? You recently mentioned that you're trying to improve, insert the behaviour. Are you open to having a chat about what I have observed? Now, use these as like a template, excuse me, and modify them accordingly. But these types of questions are metaphorically like knocking on a door. If the person says no, what do you do? So what would you do if you've asked a question like this and their response is no, thank you? What do you do?
Stay away.
Correct, Elena. You accept their answer, because remember from the quality conversation session, we want to make sure that our questions are genuine questions, which means we're open to accepting whatever the answer is. So if you ask a question like any of these and they say no, then you accept it. The reality is they're not ready to hear your feedback yet. And I use the word yet deliberately. So you can, again, feel great about yourself, but now all of a sudden they've shut the door and you've just barged your way back through it. You might feel good about yourself, but they're not listening. It's not going to make any difference to them. So if you ask a question like this and they say no, just accept it and wait for another opportunity when that should arise, okay? Now, the reality of doing this, however, from my experience, is extremely high probability that they will say yes. And in doing so, they open their door to their learning and let you in, okay? That's the most common response to these types of questions. Because you're giving power to people to open their door or not, they tend to open it. And they tend, as a result, to be less resistance. And as Ritu said at the very outset about your reaction to unwanted or unrequested feedback, is that you're significantly reducing the chances they're going to be aghast at the feedback that comes their way, because they're now open to it, okay? Now, people can still, because we've got different personalities, they can still appear a bit shocked when you tell them your feedback, and that's okay. Sometimes people need 24 hours, 48 hours to let it sink in, get over their emotional response that they now know other people know they're not perfect, right? You would have this response yourself. Some of the challenge with feedback is, gosh, people now know I'm not perfect. Well, no one is, right? But these techniques are really, really powerful. When you then give them your feedback, you must be honest and caring. One of my mentors is a facilitator. He's now in his 90s. He's still facilitating programs for high-performing teams. He's been doing it for over 60 years. And I had the great pleasure of having Bob Dick provide advice to me over time. And he said it's really, really essential that when you give feedback to people, you are honest and caring. In being honest and caring, the tricky part is to not let the caring part get in the way of being honest. I'll let that sink in for a moment. Do not let the caring part get in the way of being honest, because if you do, then you become, in fact, dishonest. If you let the caring part stop you from being honest, then you become dishonest and your feedback's not very good, right? So you should always be conscious and deliberately choose your words and use the best words you can. That's where the caring part comes in. When you know the person, you've got to use the best words you've got to convey what you honestly mean, okay? So some people that I've worked with over time have said calling people names is honest feedback because that's what I think they are. Well, no, that's not honest feedback. That's just disrespectful. So I'm not talking about that, right? When you go and label people things, you're just a label, label, label. No, that's not what this means. That means you're being disrespectful. That means you didn't think about the words you were using because all you were doing was labeling someone, okay? If after the fact it becomes clear that the words that you did try to use could have been better words, you simply apologize, but remain true to your feedback. And your feedback ought to focus on behavior. Again, not labeling people. Like, you don't say, oh, you're just an idiot. That's just being an idiot, right? If you said something like that, that's just labeling someone. The behavior might be, this behavior is indicating that you're not thinking as deeply as you could about the actions you're taking. Now, that might be a better way to explain it that's honest and caring without labeling them names that really don't help very much, okay? So spending some time actually thinking about it. And these are important life skills. Remember that the reason for your feedback is that you're trying to help them to be the best they can be in their role, both for themselves and the club. And that if you did not care about them, the easiest thing to do is just ignore it and don't say anything. Does that make sense? That's actually a lot easier than giving feedback sometimes, because it's a lot harder to actually think about, how do I get in their room of learning? What's the right question to ask? Then how can I be as honest and caring as possible without letting the caring bit get in the way of the honest feedback I'm trying to provide this person to help them be the best they can be for themselves, and in this case, for the club. Just want to check if you've got any questions about this advice at the moment. Okay, we'll keep going. So what if it's you that's attempting to change a behavior? Any thoughts on what you would do if you're the one who is attempting to change a behavior? What would you do? So let's say, for example, you use the word a lot when you speak. And so you're trying to improve and reduce how often you say especially when you're doing some form of public speaking on behalf of your club. What could you do in terms of you receiving feedback about that?
You could prepare what you wanted to speak, potentially.
Yes. So you do all of that. Could it still happen?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it possible that when it's happening, you're not aware, even though you're trying to change this behavior, is it possible that you might not be as aware of how often you're saying it as you really are?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would be really useful in that circumstance? And Alina and Sadman, feel free to jump in and help you too.
Maybe you can ask your family and friends to help remind you when you're doing the behavior.
Spot on. Yes, that's what you do. I describe it like this. You discreetly seek out 2 or 3 people who are likely to somewhat regularly observe this behavior, and ask them to give you discreet feedback. By discreet, do you understand what I mean? Good. It's not public. It's just one-on-one. They just quietly let you know about how you're going. So it might be, again, you're not trying to be perfect. You might say to them, look, I'm trying to improve my public speaking. I'm trying to reduce the number of times I say, the last time I did a 5-minute speech, I did 20. Would you mind counting for me and letting me know how many? I'm trying to get it to under 10. Now, you could be that specific if you wanted to be, something like that. And then they would just let you know, hey, Gary, you did 12 tonight, but that's a great improvement on 20, which it would be. And then they might help, oh, Gary, you only did 8 tonight. And that you're getting that timely feedback. And that's the other thing. You want to receive timely, honest, and private feedback from them. Okay, so you actually set up a structure where no one else would know that you're seeking this feedback. So clearly you go and ask people, as Alina suggested, that you trust are going to give you that honest feedback. You be as specific as you can about the behavior you're trying to improve. And again, you let them know, I need that feedback timely. Now, sometimes it's useful, depending on your personality. Even when you do this, some of us, and I know I'm like this, when you really immediately receive that feedback, you still can have that reaction, that somewhat aghast reaction to, oh gosh, I wish it was still better than that, etc. And so you can still have a sort of a negative reaction, but you can explain to people, I'm not reacting negatively in any way, shape or form because I don't want to hear your feedback. I know that's just me. I know I'll be right tomorrow, but I really, really need to hear your feedback. So please don't get stressed if you notice me looking a bit shocked when you're telling me the feedback. Keep in mind as well that this feedback is often very constructive and that you want them to give you the feedback that's also showing your improvement. Okay, that's why I chose that 12 to 12, that 20 to 12 example, and then to 8, because I want you can encourage them to focus on getting improvement. And again, I really encourage you, please try to avoid aiming to be perfect. Just be human. It's interesting with things like public speaking, a degree of imperfection has been shown to increase the engagement of the audience. A degree of imperfection, some slightly wrong words or wrong sentences, actually increases. It's one of the ways that people can tell the difference between artificial intelligence speaking and an actual human speaking. It's quite fascinating. Not too much, of course, but just subtle things like, so the odd is actually not a bad thing. Every second word, it's no good, but the odd one in this example is not a bad thing. Okay. So what about club feedback? So I'm just going to stop the share there for a sec. And in the chat function, again, I've got the Miro board. And I'm just going to ask if you wouldn't mind going to that Miro board, please. And on frame number 4, it says, what are some of the ways your club obtains feedback? And if you wouldn't mind grabbing a sticky note, please, or more than one sticky note, and coming and grabbing a sticky note, going to frame number 4, where it says, what are some of the ways your club obtains feedback? And if you wouldn't mind adding some sticky notes there, please, or use the chat function inside Zoom to do that, please. And we'll have a look at what pops up for you. So I'm looking at all the different ways that you currently receive feedback. Just checking if any of you have had having any trouble getting into the Miro board. So we've got survey as a way. Just checking how long would that survey normally take to complete? Or do you have various ones? So there's social media. So you do social media question stories, okay. Again, you can use the chat function if the Miro board's not working for you. The social media question stories, do you mind explaining that one for me for a moment, please? Whoever wrote that.
Yeah, for our club, we do like on the Instagram stories, we put like, can you give us some feedback of how we've been doing this year? And then people just type it onto the stories and then we can review it. And right. We also do Google Forms.
Okay, so with the Instagram stories, that's more like qualitative feedback.
Yeah.
Yep. And then when you've got your when you're using your Google Docs, is that a mixture of both quantitative, so like a Likert scale, which is usually a 1 to 5 scale of 1 is strongly disagree, 3 is unsure, 5 is strongly agree, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of that plus comments.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. That's a mixture of both quantitative and qualitative feedback. Fabulous, Elena. Okay, any other ways? So again, the survey, how often would that happen? And again, around about how long would it take to complete if I was a member of your club? Committee feedback to each other. Is that just in person? And if, okay, during meetings, yes. And if a member wanted to just give you feedback, how would they do that? If there wasn't a survey, there wasn't the question on Instagram or the Google Doc, or if they weren't present in a meeting or observing it, how would a member just provide random feedback for you? I'm happy for any of you to unmute yourselves if you do have a way.
For us, our like director would just message us individually, just like a quick way to get feedback.
So your director would message you, but what about a member? If a member had some feedback, how would they just do the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yes, so that means your contact details are available for members to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So that's another way to do that there. Contact details, awesome. All right. Now I'm going to share some. Keep going with the presentation. Thank you for popping them on the Miro board there. So you've just given me some suggestions as to how you obtain some feedback. Now, what's really interesting is that the best organizations are really easy to give feedback to. Throughout my history, I've been a senior assessor for the Customer Service Institute of Australia. I've led national award-winning teams. And I've mentored leaders of national award-winning teams as well. And it's really fascinating. The best organizations are easy to give feedback to. They actually get nervous when complaints go down. They get nervous when complaints go down. Why? Anyone got any thoughts on why would they get nervous when complaints go down? Because wouldn't you prefer not to have any complaints? What do you think about that, folks?
Perhaps that means that nobody really knows them or cares enough to give feedback and they couldn't improve.
Spot on, Alina. That's one of the main reasons. That is it, because people don't care enough anymore to give us the feedback that's actually out there. Now, one of the reasons why they absolutely know there is feedback out there is this. Approximately 1/3 of customer feedback, or complaints, in fact, are caused by the customer. Does that sort of make sense? The customer actually causes the very issue that they're complaining about. However, does the customer think it's their fault, or who do they blame? Who's the customer blaming, even when it's the customer's fault?
The company.
Yeah, the organization. In this case, the organization would be your club. So the best service excellence organizations understand this. Up to 1/3 of complaints are actually caused by the customer, but they're blaming you. They're blaming the organization. However, if you're easy to complain to, which means you're easy to give feedback to, then you create an opportunity to engage with these people. And this is when the great work with feedback really kicks in, is when you get the opportunity to engage with people that think you've done something wrong, even when a third of the time it was them. Okay. And what's also fascinating is that when you're easy to provide feedback to and easy to complain to, you are equally easy to compliment. In fact, the statistics are slightly higher, believe it or not, for compliments against complaints when you make it as easy as possible for people to provide you with feedback. It's slightly higher. Now, what would you do with that information, the compliments part? What could you do with that? Obviously, you say thank you, like we said earlier. And what would you do with it for the people within your, say, committee, for example, people running events? What would you do with the compliments that come to you?
You remind the members of the compliments and to keep up the work.
Yes, spot on, Lee. It's not rocket science, but you make sure that they get those compliments, the people actually doing the work, get the compliments and get that reinforcement, Alina, exactly as you said, so that they can keep doing it. They need that information to help give them the confidence to keep doing the great work that they're doing. And that's why compliments are so important. They're so important to collect, and they're so important to pass on, because we want to reinforce the behaviours that generated those compliments in the first place. So this is actually a vital skill to master when receiving complaints. Okay, so if you're receiving a complaint and they're blaming you for something that's not your fault, it may have even been caused by them, the real skill is that you've got to use your conversational skills, which we covered in the quality conversation session, to help them to understand what is really going on. So you're using those listening skills that we focused in on that session and your questioning skills to make sure that you're listening to them and you're listening to understand. And in the conversation, you're actually helping them understand what's really going on while they save face. Now, face is a concept mostly from the East, right? But actually every single culture in the world, there's not one culture in the world where the people within the culture like to lose face. Do you understand what I mean by face? Yes. Okay. No cultures like people losing face. So the real skill is, how do you help someone have that aha moment and realize it was their fault, but their face remains intact? When that happens, the customer actually becomes more loyal. I'm going to give you a little quick example. Some of you may be aware that the Western Bulldogs in the AFL, the Australian Football League, are playing in the grand final or the championship game this weekend. Which team do you think I follow? Correct, the Western Bulldogs. Their colours are red, white and blue, so the same colours as the Australian flag. It's a good reason for lots of people to follow the Western Bulldogs, okay? Now, quite a few years ago, the season starts in March of the year, and normally in the November of the previous year, they send out information regarding your membership. For some reason, when I received that information, I lost it, but I forgot that I lost it. With about a week to go before the start of the season, I rang up the membership people and said, where are our membership details? Like, where are our cards? We can't go to the games if we haven't got the barcodes to get in. And the staff member checked some information and said, oh, Gary, we actually sent you your membership cards in November of last year. But this was the trick. This was a really smart bit to make me save face. But we both know Australia Post sometimes lose mail, right? Can I just check the people on your membership? And we did. Can I check your email address? Which we did. Can I send you via email the barcodes so that we can get you into the games, which is what you really want to be able to do? I said yes. And they said, look, because it's only 1 week before the start of the season, it might take up to 3 weeks for your actual cards to arrive. That's why I'm going to email these barcodes to you. Now, also, if you'd like to avoid this problem in the future, if you moved across to direct debit, you won't have this problem where you've had to sign up and get your cards validated, and you could avoid this issue in the future. Would you like to do that, Mr. Ryan? I said, yes, please. So this is an example where the skills of the person at the other end. So could you imagine, like a lot of people, I was probably a bit more stressed and you know, I wanted my barcodes to be able to go to the games. I understood that when the call came in, and they were able to get my information very quickly and also enable me to save face. Now, the reality was, while we were having this conversation, that's when I remembered, oh, I think I remember getting that mail now. I just can't remember where I put the envelopes. So that was, I had caused the problem. I'd actually received the cards. I just didn't know where I'd put them. Is this making sense? But the skills of the person on the other end, when I was effectively complaining, helped me to understand what was really going on, use their skills, in fact, to calm me down, and use their skills to make sure that despite it being my fault, I wasn't embarrassed and I was able to get the solution that I needed to be happy. And in the end, they actually upsold me to a better product, which is fabulous skills. Okay. Any questions about how you might do what I've just explained there? And or have you got a real issue right now like this that you're trying to work out how to deal with it? No? Okay. All right. So that's the end of tonight's session. What we've done is we've gone through how to deal with feedback and use the metaphor and the mental model as feedback as a gift. We've given you 3 ways to deal with that. We've talked about the importance of collecting feedback for your club and being as easy as possible. And those methodologies that you've given, giving out your personal information, for example, and sometimes you've got to be a bit wary of that. Often if you can have organizational ways for information to be accessible, but I understand being a club, you might feel comfortable enough to give out your personal information. The easier you are to get information and get people giving you feedback, the better you're going to be able to deal with it. So we've done 8 sessions in this program. Please stay safe and continue to be the best that you can be. I've got a great deal of admiration for all of you coming along to these sessions. So we had the 8 sessions, starting with how to leverage your employability skill development while being a committee member, right through down to the 8th session tonight on feedback, how to receive it, give it, and why you should be collecting it. I just want to check, have you got any questions on this topic that we haven't covered tonight that you were hoping we had covered? You got any questions for me? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I'll stop the recording now. And once again, it's Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter, and it's been a pleasure to deliver this program on behalf of Monsu Caulfield for you. Hopefully you stay safe and we'll see you all again soon.